Hi, guys, and welcome to the second episode of DCU Daily number dos. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about Blue Beetle. It is my most anticipated superhero movie the rest of this year. And, well, it's facing a tough path to making money and a lot of people are wondering, how much money is this going to actually make? Well, let me tell you, there's three reasons why I believe this movie is going to be a hit. And today on the show, I'm going to talk to you guys about all three of those reasons. Now, you may say, well, there could be more than three reasons. It's possible. It's definitely possible. But I'm going to highlight three reasons specifically, and then maybe break down a few other things that could be playing into his favor. It's a movie that honestly, could have just landed on HBO Max. Well, Max, and it's a movie that didn't really have any right to be even in movie theaters until Warner Brothers was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And they decided to put some more money into it. They put a marketing campaign behind it. Some will say that's not the best marketing campaign they could have had. And I would agree, they really haven't done as much for it as I would have liked for them to do. But then again, we're still quite a ways out from the movie coming out. But so we'll see. Now, before I keep going into tangents here, let me just go into the three reasons why I think Blue Beetle will be a hit. Reason number one, it's going to be the first Latino-led superhero movie that we're going to see in the modern era of movies. I mean, even going back to the 80s, 90s, I mean, I don't think we have had a character who's led their own movie, a superhero character who's a Latino. Like you have Jaime Reyes, the character Zola Marijuana, is playing him. Cobra Kai fame. You got George Lopez in the movie. You have all the family themes. You've got a very different kind of a DC superhero here, and I really think that's going to help the cause. And I really love the idea of Blue Beetle just as a character, and I think the fact that this can bring out the Latino audience, it's going to need to if it's going to make money. And since I'm making a case that it will make money, I think it's going to work. This could be the Wonder Woman for a superhero movie led by a female character. It could be the Black Panther for the DCU since James Gunn. And I'm going to go into this a little bit more later. James Gunn said that this is technically going to be a part of the DCU, the character of Blue Beetle at least. So yeah, if this movie ends up being the Wonder Woman, which made over $800 million at the box office, splitting it basically evenly domestically in the U.S. and Canada, and internationally and worldwide made over 800 million, or Black Panther, which made like 700 million in the US and Canada and close to just as much internationally, on its way to $1.3 billion. I mean, even the second Black Panther movie made almost $1 billion. If Blue Beetle can catch that kind of a wave of positive momentum, I know it's been a rough summer for a lot of movies making money. I do think that Blue Beetle could, beat that trend, despite all the DC flops recently. I think it can do that, and it needs to bring out the Latino audience. It needs to bring out the Gen Z who this movie specifically appeals to. So as long as it can pull out that audience, I think it can really make a lot of money, and it can be a big hit. So far the trailer looks great. I love the trailer for this movie. It's probably the coolest DC trailer I've seen in a long time. I really like the first Wonder Woman 1984 trailer. The movie didn't turn out to be that good, but let's hope that the same doesn't happen here. I have high hopes for Blue Beetle. Reason number two, James Gunn says that Blue Beetle is the first DCU character and Superman Legacy is the first DCU film. So yes, that does imply that the events of this movie may not be canon to the new DCU, but at the same time, it does establish the fact that, hey, this ain't just another lame duck movie like The Flash or Shazam 2 or maybe even Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. This is a movie where you're introducing a character that's going to be in the new DCU. So if there's one reason that the internet has said why these last three, even Black Adam included, DC movies have flopped at the box office, is because, well, they're kind of lame duck movies coming out at a time when all of this old DC continuity is about to get thrown out the window. Well, even if the story is not canon, I do think the fact that this will be a character that we will see in the new DCU, Blue Beetle has the chance to, avoid that kind of a disaster at the box office like The Flash. I mean, dang, it just barely crossing $100 million domestically. I hope that's not what Blue Beetle is going to end up, having to worry about. I certainly don't think it will. I mean, I don't think this is going to open up to a huge opening weekend because there's not a ton of awareness for this character, and tomorrow we will talk about that. But the fact that the movie, again, is aiming at a swath of an audience out there that probably did not feel very well represented in superhero movies up until this point, I think that will play into its favor, and then hopefully the positive word of mouth can then generate that box office revenue. Wonder Woman started out with not a huge opening weekend itself, and then eventually ended up making over 800 million. It made almost as much as Batman versus Superman. Think about that. Wonder Woman by herself made almost as much as Batman versus Superman, which also had Wonder Woman in addition to Batman and Superman. Now, I'm not saying this movie is going to make 800 million. I think it will be huge if it does. I mean, right now, I think DC will be happy with anything close to 500 million. Heck, for this movie, given what the last three DC films have done, anything over 300 would be a success. But I think, if it hits its stride, it has the potential to go past $500 million, which would make it the first movie since Aquaman, the first Aquaman in 2018, the first DC film in 5 years almost to make over $500 million. Even The Rock couldn't do that with Black Adam. So, yeah, that's reason number two is because, James Gunn said, hey, look, man, this character is going to be around. So, basically inferring that you should show up and watch this because you may want to keep track of what Blue Beetle is going to be up to at Palmyra City or the greater DC universe. Now, reason number three, I think this is one that kind of ties into the one that I already talked about, but it still stands to, a reason that we should talk about it by itself. And that's because of just how much of a disaster the DCU has been recently, the DCEU, I should say. This Blue Beetle movie has little to no connection to the old DCEU, and that's something that the director of the film has said on multiple occasions during some, press interviews, and we have basically got the same impression from James Gunn as well. And if you look at the trailer, yeah, they make a Batman reference in there, but and I love that reference, like Batman's a fascist, like George Lopez says that, which is, it ties into the comic book history of the character, but when you look at the what the director of this movie, Angel Manuel Soto, said that, hey, look, we've planned this out like a trilogy. It's a movie that has very few connections to the wider DC universe, which right now you would say is the DCEU, soon to become the DCU. It gives this movie, very little baggage with it, which is something that a lot of the other DC movies recently, well, they've had a lot of baggage. Shazam 2, I think, had a very bloated budget. It should have never been made for the amount of money that it was made for, considering how much money the first movie made. Yeah, it had great reviews, but it didn't even make $400 million at the box office. Why would you drop like $200 million into the sequel? What reason was there to justify Shazam 2's budget? And, well, I mean, it bombed really hard, probably the worst flop in superhero franchise history. Black Adam had a bloated budget. I mean, it's a character, yeah, it's The Rock, but it's the character Black Adam is not mainstream quite like the Batman, the Superman of the world. So, yeah, you could have said, oh, yeah, the first Iron Man was, when that came out, Iron Man was a B-list character, sure. But still, I would say that, that's a very different time in the superhero genre. And then, it was pre-COVID. So the box office was very different. It was a very different landscape. Plus, the movie had really good reviews. That first Iron Man movie was very well reviewed. It was very well liked, and so the positive momentum, the word of mouth, really helped it get to where it got to. Same thing happened with the Wonder Woman movie that I brought up earlier. I just don't think that was the case with Black Adam. And so when I'm talking about all these bloated budgets, that's why Shazam 2 flopped so hard. One of the reasons, but definitely a big part of it. Certainly, the amount of money Warner Brothers lost is because of how much the budget was bloated. And then you look at, what happened with Black Adam, same thing. That movie could have been, I think, barely broke even, just for the record. There's controversy there depending on which news source, which article you read about it. But certainly The Flash right now, it's playing in theaters and it's not doing very well whatsoever. And that's something where I start to worry that, hey, man, I really hope that the Blue Beetle film does not end up in that situation. It's a movie that certainly looks like it deserves better. It doesn't have a star that has a lot of controversy around them. You don't have a lot of the same issues that the Flash had in terms of, all of these cameos from these characters who you may or may not see move forward in the new franchise, the new soft reboot, I guess, a DCU that James Gunn and Peter Safran are working on. And now that we have, of course, the new Superman Lois Lane cast with David Cornsweet and Rachel Brosnahan, I don't believe either of them are going to be making a cameo in Blue Beetle. They wouldn't. This movie's done already. They did throw more money into it once they decided they were going to make it a theatrical release and not throw it on Max straight to home video. But at the same time, I don't believe there's going to be any significant cameos here. Like, one thing that I've noticed these last 3 DC flops that we have seen, which I would love to have. I thought they were all pretty fun movies. I liked all 3 of them. Black Adam was fun, not the best thing, but fun. Shazam 2 was a fun movie again. Too much CGI bloated, VFX sequences and all that. I actually like the Flash quite a bit, but the CGI was a little tricky in some areas. The style choices, I should say, were not the best in terms of how the Speed Force looked and how the Speed Force made everything around the Flash look. It made it look like bad CGI, even if it was intentionally made to be that way. The fact of the matter is, perception is reality, and the reality was that a lot of people did not like the CGI. I don't think that's going to be the problem for Blue Beetle, because you look at that suit. The practical suit for Blue Beetle looks fantastic. It looks fantastic. Jaime Reyes in the trailer, whether he's slicing up the bus or flying to space, or he's got the scarab on his face and it's all this gruesome transformation, the body horror of it all. The movie looks great. It looks like, again, I'll throw back to the first Iron Man movie or, Dark Knight. Hype, not trying to say that it's going to be in that level, but what I'm trying to say ultimately is you've got a suit that can stand on its own without a ton of CGI added on. You're on not exactly on the opposite end of the spectrum from Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern, but you're sort of like, pretty far on the other side, where you don't have a fully CGI suit. You also don't have a fully practical suit, but you're sort of like where Deadpool is. They animate his eyes, but most of his suit is basically practical. There's very few things in those Deadpool movies where the suit is animated. I mean, there's a few shots maybe where he's doing some movement that they may animate that. But a lot of what makes those Deadpool movies fun to watch is it looks and it feels real, it's tangible. Unlike that Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie where the whole suit was CGI, totally CGI. The Shazam suit, the Black Adam suit, those were aided by CGI. I mean, there's a whole thing about how The Rock didn't need any padding on his suit because he basically looks like a superhero in real life. But all that being said, even the biggest complaint, even with Iron Man, after you got past his own trilogy with Robert Downey Jr., you see the later editions, especially by the time you got to Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, the people really started to notice that the suit just didn't, it looked cooler, sleeker maybe, but it just didn't feel tangible. And that clink clink, like the whole, like it wasn't like feasibly real. It felt like it was animated because it was animated. But the first Iron Man movie's suit was animated too most of the time. Like, Jon Favreau has said many times, and if you go and look at the behind the scenes or the press tour for the first Iron Man movie, that he was surprised how well made the CGI for the suit was, and ILM blew him away. Like, he couldn't tell the difference between the stuff they shot with RDJ in camera and when ILM replaced the whole body with the CGI suit. I don't think having a fully CGI suit, it works well for a lot of movies. I mean, it causes that suspension of disbelief to break. And I really like the fact that this Blue Beetle suit is very practical. Obviously, there's going to be shots where it's going to be CGI, the whole thing, or partly CGI, or whatever the case might be. Certainly when he's making those fantastical weapons, some of those transformations will be CGI. The wings will be CGI when they're fluttering and everything. But ultimately, I love the fact that this movie, is gonna give you a lot of, in-camera fight sequences and in-camera practical VFX, I should call them that. And again, going back to my third main reason for why this movie is going to be a hit, it has very little baggage, very little connection to the old DCEU. So if you're not going to see a lot of those cameos, if Wonder Woman doesn't show up out of nowhere, or if Aquaman or Flash or Ben Affleck's Batman or Henry Cavill's Superman don't just pop in and make a quick cameo, even when in the first Shazam movie they could go into a grocery store or like some department store and there's like action figures. I'm like, if they can minimize those things, that's going to further help the cause of this movie. And that's not to say like, hey, I'm booing the old DCEU. I really love the DCEU. I'm probably in the minority, but I think that in order for this movie to have a successful run at the box office, they need to avoid those connections. And if you hear the director talk about it, if you hear Zola Mariduena talk about it, it looks like this movie is pretty disconnected, and that's given the circumstances of all the other movies that it's releasing around, the other DC movies recently that have flopped, and Aquaman the Lost Kingdom to come, it's going to be probably playing into his favor that it's going to be disconnected from a lot of that other continuity. And then by virtue of that, it may also that's probably the reason why James Gunn said that it is the first character in the DCU, but not the first movie in the DCU's Superman Legacy, which infers that the story of this movie won't really matter much. But at the same time, you'll probably this is the movie where you fall in love with the character. This is the movie that hopefully will make you love the character of Blue Beetle, especially if you haven't heard of what the Blue Beetle as a character is, or Jaime Reyes as the character is. It's not a big A-list character in the comics, but it is one that has a big following. So I'm really looking forward to Blue Beetle. Earlier this year on the Also Curious show, I talked about my 5 most anticipated movies for the remainder of the year, and Blue Beetle was on there, pretty high on the list. And I really think that this movie, if it brings out the audience, especially the Latino audiences, the Gen Z crowd, and it has little to no connection to the old DCEU, while also giving you that practical suit which looks fantastic, and of course James Gunn saying that this is the first DCU character, which, hey, you're watching DCU Daily. That's what we're talking about, the new DC universe. All of those factors, I think, if everything lines up, I'm not saying this is going to be the Top Gun Maverick of this year or the Super Mario Bros. Kind of effect, where both of those movies made $1 billion. It has a lot of competition, and there's certainly a lot of movies that are going to be coming out before it, which will be in theaters by the time this movie arrives. You got Mission Impossible, Oppenheimer, Barbie, so it's got plenty to contend with. But ultimately, I think that the movie has the potential to do really, really well, and I really hope that it does. And my fingers are crossed. I'm hoping that this movie does fantastically well. If it makes $500 million, I think Warner Brothers will be over the moon. DC Studios will be over the moon. James Gunn will be so happy, and that can only bode well for, as the director of the film said, that they want to do a trilogy of these films. If the only way that happens is if this movie makes money. If this is like another dead ass flop, then they're not making any more of these. I mean, maybe they will make another one down the road, but you'll have to, have the character probably show up in a few other movies, crossover with maybe Booster Gold, or Superman or something. But if it makes over $500 million, Blue Beetle will probably be a character that you'll see in more of his own solo movies, and I certainly hope that we get to see that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. This is DCU Daily number 2. We're gonna have lots more to come, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. We're giving you DCU updates daily. On the weekends, you can check us out on the Oh So Curious show. If you got Girls Gone Geek, Late Night with Rolan Underground, the Dan show. Of course, I'm Dan, so I'll see you there too. But until tomorrow, it's been fun, and we look forward to Blue Beetle, the next movie in the franchise. Not the first DCU film, but the first DCU character, as James Gunn says. So yeah, Blue Beetle. I really love the idea that this movie is going to do well. So here's to it. My fingers are crossed. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to it too. And then of course I'll see you tomorrow on DCU Daily.